Antonio Umberto did not do parks. His world was polished marble floors, boardrooms where the air itself felt borrowed, and back-channel conversations that moved cities without a single headline. But Amara had asked him once, just once in that quiet voice she used when she wasn't asking at all, whether he ever sat somewhere without a purpose. So here he was. Riverside Park on a sunny Tuesday. He sat in the black SUV with the engine off, watching her from 40 yards away the way a man watches something he knows he doesn't fully deserve. She was crouched down in front of Lily, adjusting the little girl's hood, saying something that made the child throw her head back in laughter. The sound didn't reach him through the glass. But he watched Amara's face soften when it happened, and that was enough. Marco sat in the driver's seat, professionally silent. "Give me 10 minutes, Antonio said, reaching for the door. He had barely straightened his suit jacket when he noticed the other car. A silver sedan. Parked at the far curb with the kind of casualness that was almost, but not quite, convincing. The engine was still running. A small thing. Easy to miss if you weren't trained to notice the small things. Antonio had built his entire life on the small things. He didn't move toward Amara yet. He watched. The driver's door opened. The man who stepped out was wearing the particular expression of someone who had rehearsed what he was about to say more than once on the drive over. He ran a hand through his hair. He took one breath that was almost a sigh, the breath of a man preparing to be forgiven. Antonio knew that breath. He had sat across from enough desperate men to recognize it. He also recognized the man's face, though they had never met. He had made it his business to know Daniel Harper's face the moment Amara had mentioned his name 8 months ago. Mentioned it once, carefully, like pressing a bruise to check if it still hurt. Antonio had said nothing at the time. He had simply filed it away the way he filed everything, quietly and permanently. He began walking. Not quickly. Not with urgency. There was no reason to rush. Urgency was for men who were not yet certain of the outcome. Antonio Umberto was always certain of the outcome. Daniel had already crossed half the distance to Amara's bench when the sound reached him. It was not a shout. It was not a command. It was simply the sound of unhurried footsteps on pavement, and something about the weight of them made Daniel slow down and turn. The two men looked at each other across 20 feet of autumn light. Amara, still facing Lily, had not yet noticed either of them. Lily noticed first. The little girl looked past her mother's shoulder, and her face did the thing it always did when she saw Antonio. A wide, uncomplicated joy, the kind that has not yet learned to be guarded. She pulled free from Amara's hands and pointed. "Tonio," she said, loud and certain. Amara turned. In the space of 2 seconds she processed everything. Daniel standing 10 feet away with his rehearsed expression now crumbling at the edges, and Antonio walking toward her from the other direction with his hands easy at his sides and his eyes fixed on her face, not Daniel's. He was not looking at Daniel the way men look at rivals, measuring and calculating. He was looking at her the way a man looks at the only thing in a situation that actually matters. She rose slowly from the bench. "Amara." Daniel's voice came first, shaped around her name like he still had a right to it. "I know this is. I just needed to see you. I've been thinking a lot about Mr. Harper." Antonio's voice was not loud. Did not need to be. It had the particular quality of a door closing in a quiet house. Final, unhurried, and absolutely clear about what it meant. Daniel turned. Antonio had stopped walking. He stood with one hand adjusting his cufflinks, close enough that a normal conversation was possible, far enough that no one could call it a confrontation. He was the picture of a man at ease, which Daniel was beginning to understand, was somehow the most unsettling thing he had ever seen. "You have me at a disadvantage," Daniel said carefully. "I don't believe we've met." "No," Antonio agreed. "We haven't." He left it there. Just those 2 words sitting in the air between them like a very polite promise. Daniel glanced at Amara. Something shifted in his expression. A recalculation rapid and poorly hidden. He had come here expecting a woman who was still healing. A woman who had spent 3 years carrying a child alone and might by now be soft enough at the edges to receive him back. He had not come here expecting this. Nobody ever came here expecting this. I just wanted to talk, Daniel said, adjusting his tone to something more reasonable. To Amara. Privately, if that's. Lily. Antonio crouched down to the little girl's level without breaking the conversation, a move so smooth it might have seemed rehearsed if it weren't so clearly habit. He touched the girl's curls once, gently. Go show your mama what you found by the fountain. The thing with the wings, remember? Lily's eyes went enormous with the importance of the mission. She grabbed her teddy bear and turned immediately, trotting back toward the bench and tugging at Amara's hand. Amara let herself be tugged. But she looked back once at Antonio, and the look said several things at once, none of which were fear. Now the two men were alone. Daniel straightened. Look, I don't know who you are, but this is a personal matter between me and. She asked you not to come here. Antonio's voice remained even. She asked you 3 months ago when you requested to meet by text, which you have obviously ignored. He tilted his head slightly, the way a professor might when a student has gotten something confidently wrong. This is not a private matter to me, Mr. Harper. Daniel stared at him. Who are you? He asked again, and this time the question had lost its confidence entirely. Antonio looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked toward the bench, where Amara was watching Lily point excitedly at something near the fountain's edge, her face turned away from them both, her shoulders finally, dropped from their usual careful tension. I'm the person who made sure she hasn't looked over her shoulders not once since I arrived, Antonio said quietly. That should tell you everything you need to know. He turned and walked back toward the bench. As his eyes met Amara's. Welcome back to Tales by Jaylene. If this story already has its hooks in you, you are not alone, and you are in exactly the right place. Hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet and become part of our storytelling family. Tell us in the comments where you are watching from. We genuinely want to know. Turn on your notifications because tomorrow's story will take an exciting turn. Now let's get back to the story. He came back on a Wednesday. Not to the park this time. Daniel Harper was many things, but he was not entirely without the ability to read a room. Instead, he showed up at the one place he still knew by heart. The front steps of Amara's apartment building on Clearwater Street at 7 in the morning, with a coffee cup in each hand and the rehearsed ease of a man who had decided that showing up uninvited was the same thing as showing up brave. Amara saw him from the lobby. She stopped walking before she reached the glass door. She did not flinch. She did not reach for her phone. She simply stood there for 3 full seconds, the way a woman stands when she has already had this conversation 100 times in her head and is now simply waiting for reality to catch up. Then she pushed the door open. Amara. He held out one of the coffees. I remembered. 2 sugars, oat milk. She looked at the cup but did not take it. You need to leave, Daniel. Just 5 minutes. His voice was measured, warm, calibrated. I'm not here to cause problems. I've done a lot of thinking. A lot of growing up, honestly, and I know that's probably hard to believe, but I need you to hear me out. She crossed her arms. I'm listening. That surprised him. He had prepared for resistance, not stillness. He recovered quickly. I was wrong, he said. What I did, leaving the way I did, I was a coward. I know that. I'm not standing here trying to excuse it. He paused for the weight of the admission to settle. But I've changed, Amara. I have a stable job now. My own place. And I want to be present for Lily. She deserves to know her father. The word father landed between them like something dropped from a height. Amara studied his face the way she had learned, over years of nursing, to study people who were telling her what they thought she needed to hear rather than what was true. She looked at the set of his jaw. The way his eyes moved, not toward her but slightly past her, checking, calculating. The coffee cups he was still holding, 2 sugars and oat milk, as though the correct order was a password that opened old doors. She's 3 years old, Daniel, Amara said quietly. She named her teddy bear. She has a favorite color. She wakes up at night sometimes and asks for water and then forgets what she asked for before you even get to the kitchen. Her voice did not waver. You don't know any of that. And you don't get to walk back into her life carrying a coffee like it buys you anything. Daniel's expression shifted, just slightly. The warmth dimmed. Something harder moved underneath it, quick as a fish beneath still water before the practiced look returned. I'm not trying to take anything from you, he said. I'm trying to add something. I know what you're trying to do, she said. She held his gaze for one more moment. Then she took her phone from her coat pocket, looked down at the screen briefly and looked back up. You have a good morning, she said. And she walked past him. She did not look back. Behind her, on the bottom step, Daniel Harper stood with 2 cooling coffees and the uncomfortable realization that the woman he had left behind had not, in fact, been waiting. Someone, however, had been watching the entire exchange from a car parked half a block away. And that someone was already on the phone. Amar noticed the silver car first. Not because it was conspicuous. It wasn't, and that was precisely the point. It was the kind of unremarkable vehicle that blended into any street in any city without asking to be looked at twice. But it had been parked outside her building on Monday. It reappeared near Lily's preschool on Tuesday. On Wednesday morning, after Daniel's visit on the front steps, she had walked half a block before realizing it was moving at exactly her pace. She stopped walking. The car stopped too. She pulled out her phone and called Antonio. He picked up on the first ring, which he always did, and which she had stopped finding remarkable only recently. There is a gray car following me, she said without greeting. Would you like to tell me whose it is before I take a photograph and call the police? There was a brief pause on the other end. Not the pause of a man caught off guard, but the pause of a man deciding how much truth was the right amount for this particular moment. It's mine, he said. Amara exhaled slowly through her nose. Antonio. His name is Reeves, Antonio said. Former law enforcement. He has been with me for 6 years. He will not interfere with your day in any way you will notice. I noticed. Yes. Another pause. You are not most people. She stood on the pavement with the phone pressed to her ear and her free hand on her hip, looking at the gray car which had the decency to stay still. A woman walking a dog passed between them without knowing she had just walked through a standoff. This is not something you get to do without asking me, Amara said. You're right, Antonio said. I should have told you before I arranged it. She waited for the rest. The justification, the gentle reminder of his resources, the careful construction of an argument she could not easily dismantle. It did not come. Daniel showed up at my building this morning, he said instead. 7:15. He had been parked on your street since 6:40. The information settled over her like cold water. She had not known about the 6:40. He is not here because he misses you, Antonio said, and his voice had shifted now. Not harder exactly, but quieter, the way things go quiet before they become serious. And he is not here because he wants to be Lily's father. I do not yet know exactly what he wants, but I know it is not what he is saying. And until I know more, I am not willing to leave you unguarded. Amar looked down the street. Ordinary morning. A bakery opening its awning. A man checking his watch. The city moving through itself without the faintest idea of the conversation happening inside it. How long have you known? She asked. Long enough that I am angry with myself for not telling you sooner, he said. It was the most unguarded thing she had ever heard him say. She looked back at the gray car. Reeves, he had called him. Former law enforcement. 6 years. She thought about what it meant that Antonio trusted someone for 6 years, given the world in which trust was not a virtue but a liability. He stays back, she said finally. Lily doesn't see him. Agreed. And you tell me everything from here. No more managed information. Yes, Antonio said. And then quietly, thank you. She wasn't entirely sure what he was thanking her for. But something in the way he said it told her he wasn't thanking her for the permission. He was thanking her for staying on the line. The warehouse on Kellner Street had no sign outside and no reason to exist on paper. It sat between a closed laundromat and a unit that had been leased to a tile company for 11 years without anyone ever delivering a single tile. The kind of block that cities forget about on purpose. The kind of place where conversations happened that were never meant to leave the room. Daniel arrived at 9:47, 12 minutes late, and already sweating through his collar despite the cold. The man waiting for him inside did not stand when he entered. Vincent Moretti was 53 years old, unhurried in the way that only men with real power allow themselves to be, and he had the particular stillness of someone who measured other people by how quickly they started talking when a silence went on too long. He was seated at a folding table with a single lamp, a glass of water and nothing else. No phone. No associates visible, though Daniel had the distinct sense that the shadows near the back wall were not entirely empty. Daniel sat down across from him without being invited to. You were seen, Vincent said. I was careful, Daniel said. Vincent looked at him the way one looks at a cracked window. The man in the park. Who is he? I don't know yet. Daniel leaned forward slightly. But I'll find out. Give me more time. Time, Vincent repeated as though the word had just been used incorrectly. You owe $460,000, Mr. Harper. You have owed it for 14 months. The arrangement we made, the only reason you are sitting in this chair right now instead of somewhere considerably less comfortable, was very specific. You get close to the woman. You find a way to access the child. You deliver and your debt is cleared. Daniel's jaw tightened. She's not as easy to get to as I thought. Then you miscalculated, Vincent said simply. Which is, if I'm being accurate, a pattern with you. The lamp between them hummed faintly. Outside, somewhere distant, a truck changed gears. The man she's with, Daniel said, keeping his voice even. He had someone watching her building. A professional. That's not a boyfriend, Vincent, that's infrastructure. Something shifted in Vincent Moretti's expression. Not alarm. Men like him did not do alarm, but attention. A recalibration so small that most people would have missed it. Describe him, Vincent said. Daniel did. The unhurried walk. The cufflinks. The way he had said Daniel's last name like he was reading from a file he had memorized some time ago and was only now choosing to reference. Vincent was quiet for a long moment. Antonio Umberto, he said. Not a question. The name sat in the room differently than other names sat in rooms. Daniel felt it. You know him. Everyone in this city knows of him, Vincent said. Knowing him directly is something very few people survive long enough to regret. He picked up his glass of water, considered it, set it back down without drinking. This changes the approach. Then we find a different way, Daniel said quickly. I'm telling you, she trusts me a little. I can still get there. I just need. You need to understand something very clearly. Vincent's voice dropped to just above a murmur. Umberto does not make mistakes with the things he protects. If that child is under his coverage and you move carelessly, your debt becomes the least of your concerns. Daniel said nothing. Get closer, Vincent said, rising from his chair. And do not get seen again. The lamp clicked off before Daniel reached the door. He walked back to his car in the dark, and for the first time since he had driven to Riverside Park with his rehearsed expression and his careful smile, the full weight of what he had agreed to settled somewhere behind his ribs and did not move. He had come back for money. He had walked into something else entirely. Amara had learned, somewhere between nursing school and single motherhood, that the body knows things before the mind is ready to name them. It was the same instinct that made her double-check a patient's chart when everything looked fine but something felt slightly off. The same quiet alarm that had her standing in Lily's doorway at 2 in the morning, 30 seconds before the little girl woke up coughing. It was not supernatural. It was attention, the deep, practiced kind that comes from years of having no margin for error. And for the past 4 days that instinct had been wide awake. Daniel had texted twice since the morning on the front steps. Both messages were careful. Measured. The first asked if they could find a neutral time to talk for Lily's sake. The second was shorter. Just a check-in, he said, because he was thinking about her. Both messages had the texture of something constructed rather than felt, the way a sentence sounds when it has been written, deleted, and rewritten before being sent. She had not replied to either. But it was not the texts themselves that stayed with her. It was the timing. The fact that he had reappeared after 3 years of complete silence, with no warning and no gradual approach, as though someone had wound him up and pointed him in her direction. Men who genuinely felt regret did not arrive fully rehearsed. They arrived messy, uncertain, tripping over their own sentences. Daniel had arrived the way a person arrives when they have somewhere specific to be. She thought about this on a Thursday evening while Lily sat at the kitchen table drawing butterflies with uneven wings, narrating each one to herself in a serious undertone. Then she picked up her phone and called Antonio. "His job," she said when he answered. "The one he mentioned. I want to know if it's real." There was a brief pause. "What made you ask?" "He said he's been working in property development for the past 2 years. She kept her voice low, one eye on Lily. "He mentioned a firm but not a title. He mentioned an office but not a city. He said, stable, 3 times in 5 minutes, which is exactly the number of times a person says a word when they're hoping repetition makes it true." Antonio was quiet for a moment. Not the quiet of someone with nothing to say, but the quiet of someone recalibrating. "I'll have an answer for you by tomorrow morning," he said. "There's something else," Amara said. The way he looked at Lily in the park. It was not the way a man looks at a child he wants to know. It was the way a man looks at something he is trying to figure out how to use. The line went very still. "Amara." Antonio's voice was careful and deliberate. "I need you to hear me when I tell you that your instincts on this are correct, and that I am already looking." She absorbed that. "How long have you been looking?" "Since the park," he said. She did not say anything for a moment. Outside the kitchen window the evening was settling into the street, unhurried and ordinary, indifferent to the conversation happening inside it. "Tell me when you find something," she said. "I will," Antonio said. "All of it. Nothing managed." She believed him. Across the table Lily held up her latest butterfly, purple wings, one larger than the other, an enormous crooked smile drawn where a mouth would never be. "Mama, does this one look brave?" Lily asked. Amara looked at her daughter for a long moment. "Yes, baby," she said. "She looks very brave." Antonio had a rule about public confrontations. He did not have them. Not because he lacked the capacity for them, but because a man who conducts himself loudly in public is a man announcing that he has run out of quieter options. Antonio had never run out of quieter options in his life. So when Daniel Harper appeared at the entrance of the Meridian Center parking structure on a Friday afternoon, positioned too deliberately to be coincidental, hands in his jacket pockets, chin lifted with the particular angle of a man who has been practicing this moment since Thursday, Antonio noticed all of it and slowed his pace by exactly nothing. Marco had clocked Daniel first and moved half a step forward. Antonio raised one finger without looking at him. The same finger, the same instruction as the park. "Wait." He walked toward his car at the same unhurried pace he walked everywhere, and he allowed Daniel to close the distance between them because there was no version of this where Antonio Umberto walked away from anything. "I was hoping I'd run into you," Daniel said. "I know," Antonio said. He pressed the key fob. The car unlocked with a quiet sound. "You've been parked on the 2nd level since 1:45. Daniel's opening confidence stuttered almost imperceptibly. He recovered. "I think we need to have an honest conversation. Man to man." About Amara and about what you think you're doing in her life. Antonio set his bag on the passenger seat through the open door. He did not turn around immediately. He took exactly the amount of time he needed and then he turned. Go ahead, he said. Daniel blinked. He had clearly prepared for resistance, for a wall to push against, for the satisfaction of making a powerful man defensive. Antonio had given him an open room and no furniture to knock over. She is the mother of my child, Daniel said, recalibrating. And whatever arrangement you have with her, it doesn't change that. I have rights. Legal rights. And if you think your money or your people are going to stand between me and my daughter, you are making a very serious mistake. The word people landed with the inflection of a man who had done just enough research to be dangerous and not quite enough to be accurate. Antonio looked at him for a long, unhurried moment. Your daughter, Antonio said. He said it with no particular emphasis, the way one repeats a phrase in a foreign language to confirm pronunciation. You filed no acknowledgement of paternity. You made no contact for 38 months. You have not, to this point, made a single formal inquiry through any legal channel. He tilted his head slightly. So when you say legal rights, you are describing something you have not yet attempted to establish, in a jurisdiction where the process is neither quick nor inexpensive, with a judge who will require considerably more than 3 unannounced visits. Daniel's jaw tightened. I'm not talking about judges, he said, and his voice had dropped now, losing its rehearsed warmth entirely. The mask had slipped, and underneath it was something rawer and less careful. I'm talking about you staying out of something that doesn't concern you. She concerns me, Antonio said simply. Therefore it concerns me. He picked up his keys. I'd encourage you to pursue the legal route, Mr. Harper. His voice remained even, almost pleasant. It will take approximately 8 months, cost you money you don't currently have, and arrive at an outcome that will not go the way you're hoping. He opened the car door. But you're welcome to try. He got in. He did not watch Daniel in the mirror as he drove out. He didn't need to. Daniel stood alone in the parking structure with the echo of his own threats cooling around him, looking to the security camera blinking quietly overhead, exactly like what he was. A man who had brought a script to a conversation that required none. Amara had not planned to call Daniel. But Antonio had sent her 3 documents that morning. A summary quietly compiled of Daniel Harper's last 24 months. No property development firm. No office. A short stint at a logistics company that had ended abruptly, followed by a trail of borrowed money, unpaid balances, and 1 civil judgment that had been settled out of court for an amount the document described only as significant. The stable life he had described on her front steps did not exist anywhere except in the story he had been telling. She read it twice. Then she called him. He answered on the second ring, surprised enough that his voice carried it. They agreed to meet at the coffee shop on Birch Avenue, neutral ground, no audience except the Tuesday morning regulars who minded their own business over their crosswords and their oat lattes. Daniel arrived looking composed. He had worn it well, she thought, the presentation of a man who had his life arranged. He ordered a coffee he probably couldn't afford and sat across from her with the patient expression of someone who believed this meeting was progress. I want to ask you something, Amara said, and I want you to answer without thinking about it first. He spread his hands open on the table. Reasonable. Willing. Of course. What is Lily's favorite color? The question landed simply without drama. Daniel's open expression held for exactly 1 second longer than it should have before his eyes moved. Just slightly, just enough. In the direction of someone searching for an answer they do not have. She's 3, he said carefully. Kids change their minds about things like that all the time. She doesn't, Amara said. It's been yellow for 7 months. She asks for the yellow cup every morning. She picked yellow boots in a store full of options. She told her preschool teacher her favorite color was yellow like the sun and then corrected her teacher's drawing of the sun because the yellow wasn't right. She paused. You don't know that because you have never spent a single afternoon with her. Daniel's jaw tightened. The patient expression was working harder now. Amara, that's not fair. You haven't given me the chance. I also know about the debt, she said. The table went quiet in a way that had nothing to do with the noise around them. Daniel's face did something complicated. Several calculations moving at once, none of them landing on the right answer fast enough. I don't know what you think you've found, but $460,000, she said, keeping her voice low and level. And a meeting on Kellner Street. His composure did not collapse. It simply vacated the way water leaves a glass that has been turned over, all at once and with no drama. He did not confirm it. He did not need to. Amara folded her hands on the table and looked at him with the clear, unfrightened steadiness of a woman who had already made her decision before she walked through the door. You didn't come back for Lily, she said. You came back because someone sent you. And whatever arrangement you made, whatever you promised them, it ends here. Because if you come near my daughter again, you will not be dealing with me. She stood. She left 2 folded bills on the table for the coffees. Goodbye, Daniel, she said. She walked out into the Tuesday morning and called Antonio before she reached the corner. He answered on the first ring. It's done, she said. A brief silence. Then quietly, are you all right? She thought about Lily's yellow sun drawing pinned to the refrigerator at home, crooked and certain and entirely whole. Yes, she said. I am. The call came at 2:17 in the afternoon. It was Lily's preschool. Miss Calloway, the afternoon teacher, whose voice had never once in 18 months carried anything other than cheerful competence. Today it carried something else entirely. Mrs. Bennet, I'm so sorry to call like this, but we had a situation at pickup. A man came to the gate during outdoor time. He told the front desk he was Lily's father and that there had been a family emergency. He had identification. A pause that lasted too long. We followed protocol, we called the number on file, but the number had been changed in the system this morning. We didn't realize until Lily left with him 20 minutes ago. Amara heard every word. He did not scream. She did not drop the phone. She stood completely still in the middle of the hospital corridor where she had taken the call on her break, and the noise of the ward around her became a distant, irrelevant thing. What did he look like? She said. Her voice was flat and operational. The voice she used when a patient coded an emotion was a luxury nobody could afford. Miss Calloway described Daniel Harper in 12 words. Amara hung up and called Antonio. He answered before the first ring finished. Daniel took Lily from preschool, she said. 20 minutes ago. The silence on the other end lasted less than 2 seconds. Where are you? He said. Mercy General. 3rd floor. Stay there. Do not move. Reeves is 4 minutes from you. His voice had not changed in volume or pace, but something in its quality had shifted. The way a sky shifts in the hour before a serious storm, when the light goes wrong and the air becomes something you can feel against your skin. Amara. Look at me when I get there. Not before. Antonio. Her voice cracked once, cleanly like a branch under too much weight. She has her teddy bear. Pause. I know, he said quietly. I'm already moving. He had been moving, in fact, since 30 seconds before her call. Because Reeves had flagged the preschool gate footage at 2:11, the moment the silver sedan from Riverside Park appeared on the street outside. Antonio had been in a meeting on the 14th floor of a building 12 blocks away when the alert reached his phone. He had left the meeting without explanation, which was something he had not done in 6 years, and which told Marco everything about the weight of what was happening. By the time Amara called, 3 separate phones in 3 separate locations had already been picked up. By the time Reeves reached Mercy General, 2 men Antonio trusted above almost everyone were already tracing the sedan's last known direction through a network of cameras that had no affiliation with any law enforcement agency in the city. By the time the sun began its slow descent behind the skyline, everyone who needed to know what Daniel Harper had done already knew. Everyone, that is, except Vincent Moretti, who was sitting in the back of a car on the other side of the city, waiting for a call that would confirm the first phase of his plan had worked. He did not yet know that the plan had already been seen. He did not yet know that the moment Daniel Harper had walked through those preschool gates, he had not simply taken a child. He had ended whatever remaining patience Antonio Umberto had been keeping in reserve. And in this city, in this world, there was only one thing more dangerous than making Antonio Umberto your enemy. It was doing it by reaching for something he loved. The Kellner Street warehouse had been Vincent Moretti's meeting place. The shipyard on the South Dock was his insurance policy. It sat at the edge of the waterfront behind two gates and a fence line that looked abandoned from the outside and very much was not. 3 shipping containers arranged in a loose triangle. Floodlights that came on only when something worth watching was happening. The kind of location that existed in every city. Off the map, off the record, and entirely understood by the people who needed to understand it. Daniel had driven there with Lily asleep in the back seat. He had not planned for her to be asleep. He had brought juice boxes and a coloring book, because even Daniel Harper, in the very worst version of himself, had tried to make the car ride easy for a 3-year-old. Lily had fallen asleep 20 minutes in, one hand still holding a yellow crayon, her teddy bear pressed against the window. He had not looked in the rearview mirror after that. He told himself this was business. A transaction. That he would hand her to Moretti's men for 48 hours. Just long enough for Amara to receive the message and comply, just long enough for his debt to be cleared. And then Lily would be returned. He had told himself this so many times on the drive that the words had lost their shape entirely, the way a repeated word becomes a sound without meaning. He pulled through the second gate at 4:51. He did not notice that the gate had already been open when he arrived. He parked between 2 containers and stepped out. 2 of Moretti's men emerged from the shadows ahead. He raised a hand in acknowledgement and turned to open the rear door. The rear door was already open. Lily was gone. Daniel spun around. Antonio Umberto stood 12 feet away at the edge of the floodlight's reach, with Lily asleep against his shoulder and one large hand resting on the back of her small head the way a man holds something irreplaceable. He had not dressed for a shipyard. He was still in the same clothes he had been wearing when Amara called him, which meant he had come directly, without stopping, without preparation, without anything except the information his people had fed him across 12 blocks and 40 minutes of driving. He looked at Daniel with an expression that was not anger. It was quieter than anger. It was the look of a man who has already decided the outcome and is now simply waiting for the formality of the moment to conclude. Behind Antonio, in the darkness beyond the containers, were shapes that did not move or speak but were very clearly there. Moretti's 2 men looked at each other. Then they looked at the darkness behind Antonio. Then they made the only sensible decision available to them and did not move at all. "She woke up when I got her out of the car," Antonio said, his voice low and even. "She asked where her mama was. I told her 10 minutes. He looked down at the sleeping child once, briefly. She was satisfied with that. Daniel's mouth opened. Nothing that arrived was adequate. "You were going to hold her," Antonio said. 48 hours. Amara signs whatever Moretti needs her to sign. Your debt clears, Lily comes home, and everyone agrees it never happened." He tilted his head. "That was the plan." Daniel said nothing. "I want you to understand something, Mr. Harper." Antonio took one step forward and stopped. "I have, until tonight, conducted myself with considerable restraint where you are concerned. Out of respect for Amara's preference for peace. Out of my own judgment about what she needed from me." His voice did not rise. "That restraint ended the moment you put her daughter in a car." From somewhere deeper in the shipyard came the sound of movement. Unhurried. Organized. The sound of a situation being thoroughly managed by people who had done this before. Daniel finally spoke. "Moretti will come after you for this." "Moretti," Antonio said, is currently having a conversation with two people from my organization who visited his home in the last hour to explain that this arrangement is concluded. He paused. He is a practical man. He will reach the correct conclusion. Daniel looked at the sleeping child, at the darkness, at the two men behind him who had silently, in the last 30 seconds, chosen a different allegiance simply by not moving. "What happens to me?" he said. Antonio looked at him for a long moment. "You leave," he said simply. "Tonight. The debt is cleared, by me, not by Moretti, which means you owe me now, and what I require in return is that Lily Bennett grows up without your shadow in her life." He adjusted the child against his shoulder with a gentleness that was almost unbearable to witness given where they were standing. "If I ever have reason to revisit this conversation, Mr. Harper, it will not happen in a parking lot." He turned and walked toward the gate. He did not hurry. He did not look back. Daniel stood alone in the floodlight of a shipyard that was no longer anyone's safe place, with the full weight of every decision he had made in the last 3 years settling onto his shoulders all at once. He had come back for money. He had lost everything else instead. Amara was sitting on the front steps of her building when the black SUV turned onto Clearwater Street. She had not been able to stay inside. Reeves had brought her home from the hospital at Antonio's instruction, and she had walked through her apartment once, past Lily's bedroom door, past the yellow crayon drawings on the refrigerator, past the small pair of boots by the front door. And then she had come back outside and sat on the steps because the rooms were too full of her daughter's absence to breathe in properly. She had her phone in both hands. She had not cried. She was saving that for later, for after, for the version of tonight where later was a thing she was allowed to have. The SUV stopped at the curb. Antonio stepped out first. He came around to the rear door, opened it and reached inside. When he turned back toward the building, Lily was on his hip, awake now and slightly disoriented in the particular way of a child who has slept somewhere unfamiliar and woken to a face she trusts completely. She was still holding the yellow crayon. Amara was on her feet before she was aware of standing. She crossed the pavement and took her daughter into her arms in one motion, pressing her face into the warmth of Lily's curls, holding on with both arms and both hands, breathing her in like a woman coming up from underwater. Lily, for her part, accepted this with the patient tolerance of a 3-year-old who did not fully understand the evening but understood that her mother needed a very long hug and was willing to provide one. "Mama," Lily said into her shoulder. "Tonio found me." Amara laughed. It came out broken and whole at the same time, the way certain sounds only come out when relief and exhaustion arrive together. She pulled back just enough to look at her daughter's face. Unmarked, unconcerned, entirely herself. "He did," Amara said. "He did, baby." She looked up at Antonio over the top of Lily's head. He was standing 2 feet away with his hands easy at his sides, watching her with an expression she had not seen on him before. Not the careful composure of the parking lot. Not the quiet authority of the park. Something less constructed than either of those things. Something that had been under all of it the entire time. She reached out and took his hand. He looked down at their joined hands for a moment. Then he looked back up at her, and whatever he had been carrying in the lines of his face since 4:51 in the afternoon settled and released. They stood on the pavement outside her building on Clearwater Street while the city moved along without them, indifferent as cities always are. And the three of them existed together in the particular quiet that follows the end of something that was never supposed to happen. Lily leaned out from Amara's arms toward Antonio. "Are you coming for dinner?" she asked with the directness exclusive to small children and people who have stopped being afraid of the answer. Antonio looked at Amara. Amara looked at him. "Yes," he said. "If that's all right." Lily nodded with the gravity of someone confirming an important appointment. "We have pasta," she said. "I picked the yellow bowl." Antonio smiled then, fully, without construction, without calculation. It was the least guarded expression Amara had ever seen on his face, and it arrived, of all places, because of a 3-year-old and a yellow bowl on a Tuesday evening on Clearwater Street. Inside, the yellow crayon drawings stayed on the refrigerator. The small boots stayed by the door. And the apartment that had been too full of absence an hour ago filled again, with the sound of water boiling and a child's running commentary on the correct way to stir pasta, and 2 people sitting across a kitchen table from each other with the careful, unhurried ease of people who have decided without ceremony that this is where they belong. Daniel Harper did not come back. Not that week. Not that month. Not ever. Some doors when they close do not leave a draft. And this one didn't. Thank you for staying with Amaro, Lily, and Antonio from the very first moment on that park bench all the way to the yellow bowl on the kitchen table. Stories like this one exist because of people like you, the ones who show up, who feel every moment, and who make it possible for us to keep telling tales worth telling. If this story moved something in you, do one small thing before you leave. Hit that like button. It tells us this kind of storytelling matters to you and it helps more people find their way here. Leave a comment below and tell us your favorite moment from the story. Was it the park? The coffee shop? The shipyard? The yellow crayon? We genuinely want to know. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time. New stories arrive regularly and every single one is crafted with the same care, the same heart, and the same intention as this one. Turn on your notifications so you never miss a chapter. We will see you in the next story. And until then, choose people who show up before you even have to call.